Hello, everyone. Today we are going to have our bi-weekly devoted to the 1 year of invasion, Russian invasion into Ukrainian land. I myself remember this day as really the darkest day in my life because that was the time when the forces that came to our life were much bigger than we could even imagine. They were bringing death and uncertainty, and all the people around us could lose everything, starting from their belongings to their life. When on the 23rd of February, we took care of our families, and me and my friends, we had them to go to the Western Ukraine. But when I returned to Kyiv in the morning on the 24th, I was supposed to be flying out to with the group of farmers for the networking tour abroad. And in the morning at 4 a.m. I woke up. After the shower, I heard the explosions and I heard the notifications at my cell phone that the war has started. Those notifications were coming from all my friends who cared and who were the same way shocked as me. That was the first day, the first impression of what is happening, that it is really happening. A lot of people who I know have not been in the had not believed that it can happen. People who are respectful, who have been doing successfully running successfully business, but for some reason nobody could predict, nobody could believe that will happen. As Dr. Timothy Snyder said, that the reason why hardly anyone but the military historians believe that this can happen was that Russia has always been successful in spreading their side of things, in their propaganda. And in that propaganda, there was always Russia as the inheritor of the Soviet Union, but Ukraine was always something minor. In fact, with this year, we have proven, and it is not the first time in the history, we have proven that Ukraine is much more than everybody had thought before, and much more than Russia is now. So let's go to the presentation. As usual, I will present you the latest update on the military and agricultural side of things. And then we will have a friend of ours, Mr. Rupert Lindelmeyer, joining and sharing his impressions when me and 15 women and children came to his farm seeking shelter when the war broke out after March 1st, 2022. So let's go to the presentation. So thank you everyone who are supporting us, the World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine initiative. We are grateful to Ukrainian NGO Association of Veterans in Agribusiness. They are helping us to spend the donations wisely towards the needs of the families. Just a second, I want to make sure that the screen is on. Let me restart the screen sharing. Okay. Okay, now it should be on. So the year of the war, 365 days of Russian genocide against Ukrainian nation. February 24th, it all started, and like I said, nobody was expecting it to be that massive. Everybody expected that it will have some like increase in the activity of the forces in Donbass area that had been the war region for 8 years already, but that massive attack from all the sides was not expected, at least by the civilians. As a result, these people were first to meet with the Russian atrocities. We have found out over this year a number of proofs that make it a clear statement that this war is only about genocide. While I was traveling in the United States and in Europe with the presentations about Ukraine last year, I had this question very many times. And it is only about genocide. All the other reasonings that you might think as logical people might be thinking could be the reason for this war, they are secondary. Number one is Russia needs to get rid of Ukrainian spirit and take over the Kyiv territory, which is claimed by them to be their cradle, so to say, which is definitely not true. And the proof to that you can find from the webinars by Dr. Timothy Snyder. So Russia wants to get rid of Ukrainian rebellious spirit from the people. Therefore, when they came to the cities, when they took over the cities in the north and in the south, they had the lists of those who would never accept Russian world or Russian spirit in their homeland and would can fight till the death. So Russians first, so to say, knocked with the weapon to their doors. They have seized their families, they have tortured the children, raped their wives, and killed the whole families. That happened in the towns of Bucha, Irpin, Borodyanka, all the northern parts of Ukraine, of Kyiv Oblast, partially in Zhytomyr, and a lot in Chernihiv, Sumy Oblast. The same things we have found in Kharkiv Oblast when we liberated Balakleya and Izum, and the same things, unfortunately, have been reported in Kherson Oblast, now only part of which is liberated. So it is just about genocide and getting rid of Ukrainians. Nothing else is of priority for Russia. Here are the numbers of the losses on Ukrainian side. It's totally, there are almost 70,000 of war crimes. And as you know, right now, United Nations and other organizations are step by step supporting, creating the platform for law for the military tribunal on the Russian criminals, war criminals. So almost 1,000 children injured, almost 500 children dead, and 8,000 civilians killed. What happened in Mariupol only, that is probably one of the worst situations, war crimes ever during the humanity. The World War II has not known such atrocities. Mariupol was not welcoming Russian world as they claim at their screens. Mariupol was one of the most beautiful and prosperous city in Ukraine. People spoke the Russian language mainly. However, they spoke it while wearing Ukrainian embroidered shirts and holding the flag. And Russia came and took revenge that in 2014 they had not succeeded to take over the city. This is how they act. They cannot take over the land, so they destroy everything that they can. At least 8 million people were forced to leave Ukraine. Me and, like I mentioned, 15 women and children, we were among them, but we returned. I've seen the latest polls, so at least 77% of those who were forced to leave their homes are looking for ways to return back to their homes. That is including the internal displacement and the international. There are a lot of those who were not able to leave to the Western world, to the democratic side of the globe, and they were forced to go to Russia. The same thing things were happening with children when those were taken away from their parents. And then, as we see on the news, some officials are saying to the major terrorist in Russia, Putin, thank you for the child from Donbas area. But they do not mention that this child does not want to be kidnapped by Russians. The sound of the air raid attack, has become something normal, just like an alarm clock for everyone in the morning. There have been times that Ukrainians, especially in the strategic locations, like, for example, Kyiv, or in the cities around the border with Russia, they have lived under these sounds for all this year. We got used to it, and if at the beginning it was a scary sound, later on it has unfortunately become just the reason for us to check where are the missiles and how much time we have before we really need to hide away. So 10,000 rockets, all sorts of rockets, have been launched towards Ukraine. The number of these rockets coming to Ukraine, they do not compare with any military objects or even soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers throughout the country. I'm trying to say that what Russia is claiming to be doing, that they are not targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure, that is totally not true. Mariupol theater, that is number one. Then there was Kremenchuk railway station. Then there was Kramatorsk, railway station, Kremenchuk mall, Vinnytsia mall, and even the downtown of Kyiv, when people were on the 10th of October on their ways to jobs, and in the morning the missiles landed right in front of the Taras Shevchenko University. So the total air raid alarm was announced almost 22,000 times. Over here you can see the most attacked oblasts, and of course Kyiv is number one. Now the educational institutions. We know that that Russia runs the hybrid war, the war against everything that makes you a nation other than Russia. Right now I'm speaking not about Ukraine. It has been with Georgia, the same case. It has been with all their minority nations within the Federation of Russia right now, or Russian Federation. They claim that they are protecting these cultures, but in fact they are deleting these cultures, and they start with the education. Every occupied city and town in Ukraine that Russia has stepped in, first of all, after they have taken to the prison or just simply killed the most rebellious part of society of those cities and towns, they moved to the libraries and to the schools, burned down the Ukrainian books, the books with the more objective history than Russia is trying to spread with their propaganda. And instead, they were forcing the people to shift to Russian version of the history, Russian version of the political situation, and that to be added, the passports, they force people to take passports or they will be fired. This is also against the international law of human rights. This means that if the people in the occupied territories want to continue surviving and to continue working, they need to take Russian passport. But once they take the passport, they lose the Ukrainian protection, and they can, according to Russian law, they can be asked to go to the army and fight against Ukrainians. So that is a very big anti-international law step that Russia is doing. So they have destroyed a number of the educational established institutions, schools and universities in each of the towns. As of the industry, like I said, there is no other but genocide purpose of this war. And the reason, one of the reasons why I'm saying so is that they have been destroying the buildings and the facilities of various industries, as if they do not plan to use them. So in other words, for example, when they came to Kherson Oblast, they destroyed the university and all the books in the University of Irrigation, one of the most powerful universities throughout the former Soviet Union in irrigation. When they came to Kharkiv Oblast, they destroyed the bank of seeds of genetic material as if they never planned to be using it. So they do not care about what is there. They simply want to take over and create another gray zone which is not recognized by any part of the world, and where people just try to survive, but not in fact living and developing. Very important role has been played in this war by the language. I am the linguist, and that is probably the closest topic for me. I've lived in Ukraine for all my life, and I'm from the Western Ukraine, so I speak Ukrainian. However, mostly in the center of our country, in Kyiv, in the bigger cities, and especially in the east, people spoke Russian, but they always understood Ukrainian. I have never heard the case that Ukrainian would not understand the Ukrainian language. And I have never heard a case of Russian-speaking person being suppressed by Ukrainian-speaking persons for their language or for their for the way they speak. We've been always okay with that. We speak both languages easily. However, the tendency during this war is to forget and to get rid of everything that reminds about Russia. There is a reason for that, and it's clear, it's objective. Here are the numbers. It's not translated. However, the recent poll that is showing that about 13% of people have shifted to only Ukrainian language. It means that before that they spoke Russian but understood Ukrainian. Now 13% of the whole population of Ukraine, former Russian-speaking population, now speaks only Ukrainian. Almost 40% just started to speak more Ukrainian. I understand for the people who are not linguists, it is more difficult to shift from one language to the other one. However, the fairy tales that Russians have used in their propaganda against Ukrainian language, they said that the jaw of Russian-speaking people does not allow them to speak Ukrainian, which is nonsense, not to say it with a other word. So only 30 people, almost 30% of people always spoke Ukrainian. I'm one of them, and nothing changed for me in this term. And only 1.2% of people find the speak Russian and find no reasons to shift to Ukrainian. So it means that it means that they do not care, but only 1.5% or 1.2%. So now let's go to the numbers that Russia provided during all those fake polls and elections to be joining a Russian Federation. From Kherson, from Donetsk, Luhansk, and even from Crimea. I'm sure that if the elections were run according to the law, nobody, I mean, not nobody, but for sure, we would not be seeing the situation that Crimea is leaving the part of Ukraine. That the people there before 2014 in majority were pro-Ukrainian, in majority. Of course, there were some pro-Russian. And that's one of the questions I would be willing to ask our political, political elite after the war. And another question, why were we not that prepared as we could have been to this war? But that will be after the war. Right now, we support our government, we support our president, we are grateful for all the safety that we can have right now to Ukrainian armed forces, to ZSU, as it is said in Ukrainian, and to the leader Valery Zaluzhny. So speaking about the language, when Russians came to Ukraine, they really cannot understand Ukrainian language because, in fact, Ukrainian language is more similar with Belarusian, about 67 or 70% of words are similar, and even with Polish language, it is more similar rather than with Russian language. Therefore, Russians, they cannot understand Ukrainian language. And there is even a code for the military when, for example, somebody lost their conscience due to the bomb exploding nearby. When they get back and they don't know who's around, even though in the civil life they spoke Russian, they would speak Ukrainian in order to identify themselves. Because at that moment, hardly anybody can find proof whether he is Russian or Ukrainian. For example, today there was a piece of news that yesterday, that a number of 2 brigades of Russian soldiers were moving towards along Ukrainian border from Belarus to Russia with wearing Ukrainian pixel uniform. So this is the way Russians have been fighting with Ukraine in the past, and they are doing it right now. They make up the teams that pretend to be Ukrainians, and then they do some atrocities, and they provoke the reaction. The same thing was done many times according to Ukrainian nationalistic forces during the World War II. So Russian KGB agents, they switched flags and switched the uniforms and were killing civilians, then claiming and blaming these troops, these rebellious troops, of killing the civilians. However, it was in fact Russian, and a lot of scientists unfortunately continued that propaganda in the future. For example, the Canadian scientist Paul Himka, his papers, they support this propaganda from World War II, and they keep providing information that is not true about the rebellious troops during World War II. So the language has become the instrument to identify who is the enemy and who is the patriot, who is on your side. And this is very important because Russians do not have that instrument. We do. We understand their language. Remember the situation when Russian flagship got sunken, Moscow got sunken. The same flagship had a dialogue with the soldiers at the Snake Island before. So the Snake Island people, the Ukrainian people, they understood Russians and they answered the same language. But Russians cannot say some words in Ukrainian, even if they learn. So, for example, the word that means a piece of bread, palyanica, this is a pure Ukrainian word. Russians cannot say it. And our Ukrainian civilians, at times when some tanks were, at the beginning of the war, when tanks were coming into their villages, they wanted to identify which side that soldier is from. And there are videos when the man comes over to the tank and asks the soldier, who are you? Where are you from? Say palyanica. And after the soldier failed to say this word, the man understood it is the Russian tank. Among the good news that recently happened, a surprise, I must say that I was taken by surprise because usually I take my children to school and it takes me about 30 to 40 minutes to get to school, but that day it was much longer. And the reason for that was that the downtown of Kyiv was totally closed because of arrival of the important guests. At first they said that those guests were the European politicians. However, in fact, it was the President of the United States, Joe Biden, who came to Kyiv. This is probably at one side looks like a regular interaction between the presidents. However, it is a huge sign of support, which has created the visits to Ukraine by the politicians, by the democratic world representatives, has become a good fashion, so to say, or a good manner. The President, Joe Biden, has been very welcomed in Ukraine, and he brought very strict and very clear message of support to Ukraine. So we are grateful for this visit, for the visits of all the representatives of our ally of the developed world, and for all the aid that is coming in to Ukraine. We will definitely win this war with your help. Now let's go to the agricultural problems of that year. So as the war started, the Russian troops were coming from the south, and of course they captured almost all of the ports. For Ukraine, it was the major way of transportation of grain, because 5.5 million metric tons were exported per month, were exported through the sea. All those capabilities were shut down. And as a result, we ended up with little less than 1 million capability to sell the grain. Of course, the Ukrainian hryvnia, which is our currency, got cheaper with the war. And the price for the commodities, for the agricultural commodities, they dropped radically in dollars, but they pretty much remained a little less, but remained the same in hryvnias. So, but the problem was existing until July, end of July, until the grain corridor with the protection of Turkey and European organizations was established. Right now, through this marketing year, which started in July, we were able to export 48 million metric tons. This is a huge number. However, this number is after the marketing year started after the worst months of spring when nothing was exported. There were a lot of problems with land logistics, so our export was minimal. It went up until the corridor got opened, went up until 1.4, 1.6 million metric tons per month. And it was much, much less than the farmers needed in order to get the money for the planting season. They had something prepared before. They had some capital. However, it was not enough and they needed to sell. So the ability to sell came back only in the fall. The same ability, the same transportation capacity that was before the war was reestablished sometime in the fall. You can see by the chart here that in July numbers have started to grow, and they remain the same until almost January. So we were catching up with the volumes that we were not able to export in spring. About the export, so sunflower, this is #1 commodity in all our export, and Ukraine produces about 50% of sunflower exports of sunflower oil and sunflower in the world. We were not able to get all the sunflower harvested due to the bad bad autumn, bad fall, very wet fall. So we a lot of it got just left in the fields and then rotten. As a result, our companies have reduced the sunflower production, our farms, by almost 30%. And a lot of the occupied regions, like Zaporizhia, Luhansk, Kherson, those are the less irrigated, the less moistures regions in Ukraine, where sunflower is grown most of all. So compared to the pre-war 7.5 million hectares, next year we expect to have 5.5 million hectares maximum tops. The reason for that is lack of the seed material, and the seed material for Ukraine is unique because it is adapted to Ukrainian climatic conditions, soils. So just importing seeds from abroad would not be the case. The forecast of the total area that will be planted for the agricultural production is various right now, and I would like to show you that very good article that was written. I'm sorry, just a second. So here is the address. That is the overlook of the projections to the future agricultural season by the group of companies over here, their websites. They are our partners in some projects. So they did a very thorough analysis of all the future prospects of agricultural analysis of the past year and some of the future prospects. So, for example, the numbers about the losses in agriculture. The 5 oblasts in Ukraine, all of which are agricultural, have been producing mainly the following crops. We will try to translate it later, but for example, Kyiv Oblast, eggs, sheep, and goats. Chernihiv Oblast, corn, cattle, grain crops, and legumes. Sumy Oblast, corn, cattle, sunflower. Kharkiv Oblast, sunflower, wheat, cattle, vegetables. Luhansk Oblast, sunflower, wheat. Donetsk Oblast, pork and honey. Zaporizhia Oblast, goats, sheep, sunflower, barley, wheat. Kherson Oblast, which is Ukrainian California, as I call it. Vegetables, barley, canola, soybeans. Mykolaiv Oblast, barley, honey, grapes, sunflower. So in 2022, about 27% less hectares were planted than in 2021. Also, as a result of the war, actually, the 5 oblasts that were most affected by the war are producing 35% of the sheep and goats, 32% of wheat, almost 1/3 of all the sunflower, 26% of barley, 25% of vegetables, and 23% of honey. So that's the total production in these oblasts. Majority territories of those oblasts have been highly affected by the war. You can continue making conclusions yourself. What is expected to be the drop in production of those crops? So in the future, we will have this separate bi-weekly devoted to this analysis, to this article, because it takes a while, even in Ukrainian, to read it through. It is a very thorough analysis, and you can find this over here, the address. If you want to do it, to read it yourself, the address is, you can see it on the screen, and then use some translators to translate. So let's proceed. So the total yields that we harvested this year were about half of what was harvested last year, I mean 2021. The projection for the next year, 2023, is a little bit even less. So, for example, total, it is projected that we will harvest about 53 million tons of grain and oilseeds in next season, but this season it was about 60 to 65, plus or minus according to different estimates, and 100 was in 2021. So the drop will continue. There are a number of reasons for that. For example, the fertilizers market. For example, 1 metric ton of the nitrate, ammonium nitrate fertilizer is equal $1,000. It is a huge amount for the farmers who were not able to sell their commodities at a fair price. Therefore, they will limit it to about 70 for corn, for example, 70 pounds per acre or kilograms per hectare total for production of next year. You can imagine what kind of crops will be harvested. Yes, Ukrainian soils are rich in organic matter. They are fertile, and they will provide some support to the crops. But unfortunately, you cannot set the records, or you cannot retain the same level of production unless you invest into the land. You all know that. So the situation is expected to be even worse in 2023 unless the war ends soon and the borders and the logistics chains are reopened. Now, comparison, just the comparison of the areas that were planted in 2021 and 2022, planted yields and export. For example, 25% less of the area was planted. This is one of the estimates, because we cannot speak with 100% guarantee, certainty about the lands that are still under occupation. So 28.6 million hectares, this is the total Ukrainian arable land, including Crimea and other oblasts. So only 22 were planted. As I mentioned, the yield, you see, this is, like I said, one of the estimates. For example, the farmer from Kherson Oblast who said that he has harvested some yields while in occupation, he indeed has harvested it, but recently it was after the Kherson city was liberated. Russians came to his storage facilities and took all the grain from there, not leaving even a seed for replanting. So what he produced now is not existing on Ukrainian side. Russia has taken it over. Therefore, the numbers vary from 50 to 60. This is the fork of numbers of total crops that were harvested in Ukraine last year. Grain export. It is less, 1/3 less in the market in year 2023, expected to be 1/3 less. The reason for that, right now you saw the numbers are high within from the beginning of the marketing year until now. They were high because farmers needed money. They were trying to sell as much as possible. However, now the storages are becoming empty, and the necessity to sell at these low prices is not that urgent anymore, at least as of right now. Therefore, it is expected that the numbers of export commodities will be shrinking slowly. That's one of the reasons why Odessa port has quit unloading corn, and corn is unloaded at other ports. So they start to specialize in the crops, these ports that are able to export. The reason that the volumes are lower, the total volume in numbers, in prices, is the biggest loss. So the money, the capital that farmers and Ukrainian industry and the agricultural export before the war made up 40% from the total foreign currency coming into Ukraine from the export. So the total export was made up by 40% from agriculture. Then the number one was metal and iron industry. Right now, this industry is almost dead because all those cities and factories have been destroyed by Russians or occupied. As a result, agricultural industry is number one budget forming industry in Ukraine. So the grain corridor that has been signed, as I mentioned, July 29th, is now functioning, but it expires March 18th. It has been a huge help for Ukrainian farmers, but Russia does not want to start the negotiations to prolong it after March 18th. As their ministry said, Sergei Vershinin said that it is unreasonable because the sanctions were not removed from Russia's agricultural exports. But how can we remove the sanctions on their produce if that produce brings the money to Russia that Russia uses to kill our people? How can we allow the nitrogen being transported through the pipes to Odessa Sea, the Russian nitrogen, to Odessa seaports and sold, if this is the money that is killing our citizens then? Of course, we will not do that. And the world will not do that either. Russian dirty tricks. Recently, Putin made a very big, as always, speech with a concert afterwards, and he mentioned that Russia succeeded to gain the best yield ever. True that they had very favorable conditions and they were able to get high yields. However, it is mainly thanks to the grain and to the commodities that they have stolen, just like they have stolen the toilet seats, just like they have stolen the cosmetics, the computers, and everything they could take into refrigerators from Ukrainian houses and taken it to Russian houses. This is the true Russian soldier. stealing everything they can steal. Now about a positive thing, a little bit about more optimistical things. Before the recent event named Refarm, I personally was thinking that Ukrainian egg industry is really going to be in a dangerous situation next year, in extremely dangerous. It's either survive or die. However, this event that collected over thousands of agronomists, engineers, and all sorts of the people devoted to egg industry, coming to Lviv, the western capital of Ukraine, and listening to the new technologies, to the economical presentations, and to a recommendation of experts how to run the farms next year. Our company, Travelite Agro, was invited there. We were speaking about the focus on the regenerative egg that we are going to take next year, because this is something that economizes the cost, but still makes sure that the egg business is profitable. So at this conference, I've understood that our egg industry is going to survive. It is resilient enough to successfully come through the next season, and it is going to be fighting just like the soldiers are fighting in the battlefields. The farmers will keep on fighting in the agricultural fields. Another thing that I've noticed is that Ukrainian mobilization has affected very much agricultural companies. In communication with people, this is not an official information, that's just pure my numbers. I think that the egg industry, although being protected, has lost at least 20% of their employees. Those are the people like tractor drivers, agronomists, people who work in the field. By saying lost, I do not mean that they are lost forever. However, they serve in the army and they cannot work in the field right now, and they need to be substituted, but lack of hands results in smaller yields, in less effective farming. As a result, less people than was expected came to the exhibition, because we have the situation that police officer can stop you on the road, check your documents, and provide you with the request to come over to the military department at your hometown. It means that most likely after that you will be invited to the army. I'm not saying that Ukrainians are reluctant to protect their homeland. Vice versa. A lot of people have been to those departments and have been rejected because they said they're overfilled. For example, my cousin recently went to, he got this request. He went and now he's in Spain. We've provided him with a drone for surveillance. People understand that this is the only way to survive and to be able to continue normal life. However, for the industry, from the standpoint of business, this is very harmful, because the farm operations need this labor, and if the labor is leaving, like I said, the effectiveness is much less. More hectares will be left fallow, unfortunately. This is what we have presented at this exhibition. Our team, we started to create before the war a comfortable van for agricultural trips throughout Ukraine, and we will be using it in the future. And also, we announced the major conference, which is partially a humanitarian conference. It is organized by our business company, Travelite Agro, and along with World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine, because we are going to speak about phosphorus and potassium, how to use it wisely in order to have it to have the same results as before the war with minimum supply. Now I would like to check if Mr. Rupert is here. Let me I will probably need to be... Rupert, are you there?
Yes, I hear you.
Oh, hello there, Rupert. I
Hello.
didn't see the name of the person connected. So we are being watched mainly on YouTube right now. So everybody, I would like you to meet Rupert Lindelmeyer, a close friend of mine before the war and now a close friend of all our team and our families, because when the war broke out, we, as I mentioned, went to the Western Ukraine, but the rumors were saying that Russians might try to shut off the connection with the western border of Ukraine, the connection with Europe, and then we would be occupied. All the territories would be occupied. So me and 15 women and children left Ukraine. I was able to leave Ukraine, and I took them to Rupert, who kindly provided us with shelter at his farm, with a kind word and support. However, when we came to Rupert, that was probably the worst times we've lived through, for the reason that we were leaving our home, our relatives, our old past behind, understanding that we might not ever return there. Yes, the most precious people were next to us. Our children were with us. However, for some families, their husbands, the fathers, were forced to stay in Ukraine. So it was a very hard decision. However, it was made, and we are glad that we had a friend, and we had a place to stay in these worst times, that we were not the ones who were killed in Bucha, Borodyanka, and Bucha is just 20 miles from my home. So nobody could guarantee that Russians would not come over and do the same terrible atrocities in my village where I live next to Kyiv. So Rupert, I will turn off the screen here just so that everybody could see you. Yeah, hello. And so tell me, please, what were you thinking when you were deciding to host Ukrainians back then?
This was very easy. I was the first time in Ukraine, 2019. This was a soil class, and this time I was only in Kyiv, but I met you and Olha, and we make friends, and I feel that you have, how will I say, you and Olha have a very, very warm heart. So I appreciate your hospitality, to sharing the knowledge, and so like an old friend. And then I was the second time in Ukraine, 2021 in summer, 2 weeks. And this was very instructive for me in the fields. And there all the Ukrainians I met, they was so friendly, so open, so hospitality. And this, I travel a lot in the world, but this, like in Ukraine, was not, for me, not normal. And then Roman, we always stay in contact, more or less, not each week, sometimes a few months, sometimes a few times a week.
True.
And then it comes the war, and for me, makes no sense. I cannot understand. We are in the 21st century, and we start the war in Europe. For me, this makes me absolutely speechless.
Just like for everyone.
Yes, this. I don't know what I would say about this. And then I never was in military. I never have a fear about war or something else. I grew up in Western Germany, well, with the Cold War, but was never really impact to me. And then I hear from you that in the news also that the Russian comes to Ukraine, and then for me was no question that they say, Roman, in case of any problems, you come to me. I have a few flats for my normal workers who work in the summer in my farm for the sweet corn and the pumpkins and the flowers. And then I say, okay, Roman, in any case of problem, you always welcome. I invite you. Normally you invite people for they come and you know, Roman, but in this case was no question. I say, Roman, you can come. And then Roman come altogether 15 people, and this group was prepared for a short time, and I say, Roman, I'm always optimistic, but I'm a realist. And then I say, Roman, I think you stay longer, because the Russians, they come not for a short trip. They will occupy whole Ukraine. For me,
I remember how you provided us with all the supply for staying, and there was a huge box of the toilet paper. I thought, oh, we will not use even 1/10 of it. But in fact, you were right. Unfortunately, and fortunately at the same time. And that was the case with many Ukrainians. I've also had spoken with, and still there are a lot of Ukrainians staying abroad at farms, at the shelters in Spain, in Great Britain, Ireland. Even 2 members of our team right now have been forced to leave Ukraine. One of them is in Ireland, the other one is in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
The one from Canada is the one in Canada is from Melitopol, which is occupied right now. So they do not know what's happening with their apartment and with their flat. So all the stories that I've heard that Ukrainians were sheltered, if it is the correct word, provided with shelter. We are grateful for the support from the countries because there was not only the shelter, but there was some monetary support, which was necessary, of course, in order to survive all that year. But like I said, 77% of the people want to come back to their homes, disregarding whether it is within, they were displaced within Ukrainian territory or abroad. And Rupert, I remember your attitude when we said that we are going to Ukraine in September. And that was before those massive attacks. And yeah, you were diplomatically silent, but you thought that at that moment it was not the very best idea. Maybe it is not even now, especially taking into consideration that it is an anniversary and Russia is taking more and more, is raising the stakes more and more in this war. But this is the way it is supposed to be. The shock, then help, and then fight, because this is the only thing that can guarantee the future. Yes, we can survive in the conditions like Russians live, for example, without the toilets, without the asphalted roads in the villages, and with only a TV screen as the information source. But that is just like George Orwell wrote in his 1984. That is not the kind of life that Western world is choosing. Europe, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Ukraine. And the more we go into it, the more countries understand that this must be stopped and what is the only way to stop it. So we are in the situation here that I would name just not much choice. Right now, it's clear. And like I said, like I always said, by the way, we had, thanks to this ability to stay at your place, we've learned a lot about Germany. Our children learned German language and your culture, and some of them even from time to time remember and like are nostalgic about the times spent in Germany. So it laid the ground for the new relationship and new friendships in the future and closer relationships between the countries as a result. let's hope it will be just developed in that way. And of course, there will be new projects, and of course, we will be inviting you to Ukraine, to the peaceful Ukraine, to the maybe it will take time before it becomes the same beautiful as before the war. However, there is the farmers are still working, and I would say, the farming spirit depicts the whole Ukraine. In the Soviet times, or right after the Soviet Union collapsed, it was considered to be not very high end. I mean, not very respectful to be a farmer, because farmers would be like somebody who do not earn much, who do not know much, who
This
do
is
not
in the
drive.
Western countries also. It's normal.
Yeah, who do not drive fancy cars. But now, as we are learning what is the power and where lays the true value, this is the soil, this is the family, this is the nation, this is the culture, we are more and more proud of us being an agricultural country. And we are opening, I mean, the doors are open, and anyone, even the presidents, can come over and see it. However, I mean, unlike at the beginning of independent Ukraine, we were learning from others. Now we can show and create some farm shows in Ukraine. I mean, to show something to the foreigners as well, and exchange their results.
But I think when peace comes to Ukraine, as soon as possible, I hope, then the people, when you imagine what power have the people, if they work together, they can rebuild the country very short. I think this brings how will I say, this brings a lot of energy, make the energy free to rebuild. But first, the country must be free and have peace. That's the first. But in this condition right now, and at the moment, sometimes I compare it with Verdun in the First World War, and I don't know how to solve this problem. I don't know really. For me, I'm speechless about this. Absolutely.
Yes, and it was thanks to communication with you that we came up with an idea to start the World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine project, aiming to help the small farmers in Ukraine. And thanks to Regina, your daughter, who helped us get focused on this. She didn't mean that, she just wanted to share the donation to the people in need, but in fact it turned out to be the whole program that resulted. And I will proceed right now about the results. We built 2 houses for it. It sounds like only 2 houses, but this is 2 houses for the whole families who had nothing left, who had even their basement or cell with the produce burned down, because Russians came down there and they mined the potato sacks left there. So for these people, it is a giant leap. It is a small step for the country, but it is a giant leap for these people in their families. And we were contacted recently by the Yulia, the lady from Kherson Oblast. So we will proceed working with her, and now trying to, when the weather will get better, we will try to rebuild the storage facility for her small farm. Okay, Rupert, thank you for joining, and thank you for everything. This is the true example of the humane relationship between people internationally. That's the way how things should look like in the democratic world and in the world, religious world, spiritual world. But unfortunately, not everybody understands that yet.
We can have the paradise on world if the people is not. There is a few people always stupid and will have more power and more money. But if the normal people work together, we have the paradise on world, on the earth. But how they're so stupid, for me, this is But anyway, Roman, you know, you must not thank you say to me. My thank you is that in case somebody need you, you help them. And
Yeah.
if you will come again, the doors are open. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. We agree in this case, I think.
Yes.
But in
Yes.
case of emergency.
And our doors are open as well, but
Thank you.
they're open right now, but we would recommend to wait at least until summertime when the leaves turn green.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rupert. And I will proceed
thank you too.
to a few slides that are left here about Yulia and her farm. So just a second. Yeah. So Yulia contacted us. Yeah, the screen is shared right now. Yulia has a family. They've been trying hard to have a child, and they have invested all their money into this effort. Her husband has a disability, so he is not capable to rebuild all the damages done by Russians during the occupation. They were freed, liberated when Kherson was liberated. From March till October, they stayed occupied, and right now, they produce. They have quite a number of hectares as for the just for the family working. 7.4 and 6, which makes up over 10 hectares of land without any special equipment. They farm themselves. As you can see, they've been growing winter wheat, barley, and sunflowers, and had some pigs, but the land is mined right now. That's the issue number one. The issue number two is that their storage facilities are destroyed. This is the damage done to their belongings, to their real estate. And in order to continue working, they have asked us to help them rebuild the storage facility. Right now, we are looking for the way to send them the refrigerator from Kyiv, because their refrigerator, the food refrigerator at home, has been shredded with the fractures of the explosives and not working. So after they get it, we will start probably reconstruction of this, with your help, with everybody's help, reconstruction of these premises. Meanwhile, these are some of the photos about those two houses that we succeeded building. This is the Irina's house, the lady who has cows, more than 8 cows now. At wartime, in March, when the missile landed into her animal, like the shed, she had 8 cows in the field, and that is what rescued them. The pigs and the chicken were in the shed. They died from the explosion. So we rebuilt this shed into a full serving house, because her house was also shredded by the parts of the missiles. And this is the first project, Allah's project. I mentioned that even the cell was destroyed. And for you to understand, when I came to her after we constructed this house in September, she told some very strange and inhumane stories how Russians were acting there. So for you to understand, they came to their village and said, you have 20 minutes to leave, and then we'll play war here. After what, they destroyed the houses just for fun, with no war. It was even before the Ukrainian military forces came there. So this is their attitude. This is what the Russian news says. We are not killing the civilians. We are not destroying the civilians, not in the quote. In fact, everything what Russia claims they are not doing means that they do it. Everything that Russia blames others of is to blame themselves. We will win. And there are a lot of videos, there are a lot of moments to share, but I will not be taking your time. Next time we will speak in more details about the season, and the past season and the future season, and hopefully we will have some good news in the liberating of our land back to Ukraine and the people there. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your help. We appreciate your prayers, as our soldiers say that Russian missiles sometimes settle down where they are launched. They do not explode. So the prayers are working, and we on our side are helping the justice prevail in this situation with your help. All the best to you. Stay safe and have a nice weekend. Thank you, Rupert.
Roman,
Bye-bye. Tell hi to your family.
You too.
All the best to you. Bye-bye.
We phone next week about this. What
yes.
Okay. Thank
we
you.
will be in touch.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.